Story 1. A large number of customers at my job lost all sense of basic manners and decency during the COVID-19 pandemic and have remained that way. Story 2. I started working remotely 100% of the time. Since March of 2020, I have saved a total of 83 full 24-hour days, or 250 standard 8-hour workdays, that would have been spent commuting to and from the office. This time was unpaid and cost me gas and kilometers on my car. Story 3. DoorDash went from roughly $5 to $7 more than going to the store to nearly $50 for Wendy's. I used to order Uber Eats and DoorDash while I worked outside the office, and it was very convenient. It used to be just a few dollars more. During the pandemic, these companies decided to mislead everyone and claim $50 for Wendy's was a good price. Story 4. This amazing Indian restaurant in my area stopped their lunch buffet during the pandemic and never brought it back. Now it offers only expensive entrees, so it is not worth it for lunch anymore. Story 5. My husband had heart problems due to COVID-19 and stopped drinking alcohol. He was a casual beer drinker, but now our house is alcohol-free, and I feel like it has been better for everyone because it has forced me to stop drinking too. I do have a drink every once in a while, but he has quit completely. Our skin is really nice now, and together we have lost nearly 20 pounds. He looks fitter now at 40 than when I met him at 22. Story 6. It is so hard to see a specialist doctor now. I have always had the experience that you would call an office and they might say the doctor is not taking new patients. This was common and I understood it. But now, often, offices do not even have people to answer the phone, and nobody returns voicemails. Sometimes I get someone on the phone to make an appointment, and they say they will get back to me but never do. Or, if the doctor can take me, the appointment is months away, and the situation can easily get worse before then. I am not referring to pulmonologists or cardiologists, who are understandably burned out by COVID. I mean gastroenterologists, endocrinologists, gynecologists, and others. Multiple times, I have had to call my referring doctor, literally crying from frustration and begging them to call a specialist and advocate for me to make an appointment. Each time, the specialist had an appointment for me within a week or two, and they have all been great. But there seems to be no way to see a specialist these days without these backdoor methods. Story 7. I left the restaurant industry after more than 20 years. I lived in a high mortality area with no worker protections for those managing a restaurant. I came to work every day worried that one of us would get sick, concerned about employees' families, truck delays, out-of-stock issues, and frozen wages. I could have handled all of that if customers were the same as they were before the pandemic. Instead, we faced angry and violent crowds who would react aggressively over the smallest issues. I couldn't risk my staff's safety, so I kept the dining room closed and offered only takeout. One customer got mad, went back to his car, and shot at the restaurant. Another slammed on the door so hard he broke the glass and started trying to reach the lock. Someone else became so angry that they grabbed one of the kind of 16-year-olds I have ever met and tried to drag them out through the drive-through window. My assistant managers were followed home by people. I had confrontations outside after closing. A woman waited until one of my employees walked outside and then coughed on her. People urinated on the building, defecated in the parking lot, and damaged employees' headlights. It was one of the most stressful times for everyone, and when I realized that people couldn't even be kind under these circumstances, I decided to leave. I returned to school, completed my studies, and became a software developer. Just before I left, the franchise owner mandated opening the store even if only one employee was present. This was after I had requested protections for employees or at least a raise above minimum wage. A few months after I left, one of our employees passed away after falling ill. The restaurant closed shortly thereafter. Story 8. Being able to work from home as a disabled person reduced the severity and frequency of symptoms I used to experience while working in an office. I have almost doubled the hours I am capable of working each week, allowing me to live a relatively independent life. This is literally life-changing. Story 9. I realized before the pandemic that not everyone is smart or that common sense always exists. It is disturbing to realize you live around so many people who easily believe propaganda. Story 10. Being forced to stay in the house all day reset my agoraphobia to its worst. It took a lot of work in forcing myself out of the house to be able to do normal activities again, like going to work, the shops, or visiting friends and family without feeling panicky. Some days it is still a challenge to walk places. I drive almost everywhere now, which means I also struggle to lose the weight gained during lockdown. Story 11. Lack of socialization. I know most people say they love working from home, but I didn't realize until the COVID-19 pandemic how fragile my non-work support system was. Most people disappeared into their bubbles, and when they emerged, they were married, having children, had different interests or comfort levels going out, or had moved far away to raise their families. That kind of change always happened, but I didn't realize how much just going to the office for regular human interaction helped me stay balanced. It's also harder to meet friends at work with whom you can do activities when everyone is remote. Work is not the only place to meet friends, but when you spend so much time working with people, it often becomes a major source of your friendships. Story 12. The biggest change is that I am a remote worker now and have much more time to prepare better meals, go for walks, exercise, and enjoy hobbies. COVID-19 changed my life priorities completely. I used to be focused on working hard and climbing the career ladder, but now I concentrate on maximizing the things that bring me joy. Other changes include, I no longer eat out as much due to a significant post-COVID-19 drop in quality and service, combined with increased overall costs, including menu prices and tips. I feel uncomfortable in large crowds and very crowded places. I am very bothered by public illness and lack of hygiene. This does not refer to people with disabilities, but to those who are visibly sick, such as having a runny nose and coughing loudly in grocery stores, public transit, and similar places without making an effort to cover up. I also notice when people do not wash their hands properly in public restrooms, something I rarely paid attention to before. My coping skills are not as strong or become exhausted more easily. I am generally content and happy with my life and would say my mental health is better than most, especially compared to many online. However, compared to before COVID-19, I become more overwhelmed and frustrated when things get stressful, and I find myself feeling more easily irritated with others, largely because I believe social niceties and driving etiquette have declined. My alcohol consumption has increased. I remain a moderate drinker, but before COVID-19, I rarely drank at all. Story 13. On a negative note, social anxiety increased significantly and has not returned to normal levels. I simply do not like crowds as I used to. On a positive note, I fell in love with my wife during the COVID-19 pandemic. I joke that we accelerated our relationship because we were cooped up together for 2 years, and it just kept getting better. We are happily married now, and I would not change a thing. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Story 14. Not knowing how to say hello, especially with women. In France, people used to kiss even in professional settings. Then with COVID-19, it became handshakes, then fist bumps, then elbow bumps, then just waving hi. Now, some women still prefer the fist bump, others prefer kissing. Now it is always awkward. Story 15. Stores that dropped 24-hour availability continue to blame workers or theft as excuses. Like somehow these issues never existed for the past 20 years, and only after COVID did they become a reason to change company hours. Millions of late shift workers are out of luck if they need anything from the store now and have had to switch to online grocery shopping or delivery services to get things done. Story 16. Looking at my husband, who survived a terrible illness, and knowing how precious life is. Story 17. I wash my hands frequently and thoroughly. I cannot remember what my attitude was before, but it became obsessive during coronavirus disease and has settled into dignity. Story 18. I have to use an inhaler regularly now. My lungs were damaged due to coronavirus disease. I am also seeing a doctor more often. Before coronavirus disease, I rarely saw a doctor. I am tired all the time now. I have not worked out since before coronavirus disease. Just cutting the grass makes me ache badly. Story 19. Chronic sinusitis. I miss being able to breathe through my nose. Story 20. I had long COVID for about 6 months with flu-like symptoms. Almost 2 years later, while most symptoms are gone, I am not the same person physically. I get tired easily and can barely work out. Even though I work remotely most days, after work I need to rest for an hour or so in bed before having dinner and doing other household tasks. Story 21. My alcoholism. I just started naltrexone again, so hopefully it works this time. Story 22. Divorced my ex, changed careers, got in shape, and picked up new hobbies. COVID-19 was the best thing to ever happen to my life. Story 23. The restaurant industry has finally started its inevitable collapse. I chose the wrong career, and it has been an absolute nightmare since then. Making a transition has been difficult enough due to the lack of jobs in my area, and I am seeing sous chef jobs being posted for minimum wage plus 50 cents. These are wages I saw for the same job 8 years ago. There is total stagnation, and the industry is deteriorating from the inside out. Story 24. Because of the isolation, being around many people is very difficult for me now. Story 25. Sync genes like weather advice ring skirt oil person vegetable. Story 26. Curbside grocery pickup is convenient. I can shop for groceries at work and pick them up on my way home without entering the store. Story 27. I was an introvert before the pandemic. It was magnified tenfold by the widespread decline in basic human decency that the pandemic caused. Story 28. My sense of taste is still impaired. I have fallen out of love with cooking and eating, which would be fine if I did not have a family to cook for. I hate it so much. It has been 3 years of not being able to taste food properly. Story 29. COVID-19 itself is the disease that crippled and continues to cripple millions of people, myself included. The pandemic did not end. They just stopped talking about it. Story 30. I have an irrational desire to stock up on paper towels every time I go to the store. Story 31. I went from being just an introvert to becoming a complete recluse. Story 32. I started Duolingo on March 21st, 2020. I have a 1,300-day streak still going. Story 33. Zoom meetings. Sometimes I love Zoom calls, and other times I can't stand them. Story 34. We adopted our dachshund from some college students who accidentally let their dog have a litter. Light of my life after my wife and child. The gentlest, best dog ever. I also tend to wear masks on flights now, not just because of coronavirus, but also because I hate being sick on trips. Story 35. The culture conflicts that distract everyone from the real issues. Story 36. Cooking. Prior to the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic, I was a horrible cook. I ate poor quality food and was in the worst shape of my life. I was very locked down during the pandemic because I lived with someone who had recently been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. I started watching some cooking videos, then reading books, then investing in some badly needed cookware. It has ignited a passion in me that will probably have the biggest impact on my life going forward. Learning that it is possible to eat delicious, healthy, and affordable food feels like a cheat code for life. Story 37. I feel like the obvious answer is coronavirus disease 2019. It is still very much present and remains a significant threat to many, if not most, if not all people. Story 38. I handle almost all door handles using my shirt. I also use disinfectant after pumping gas. Both of these practices are good even when there is no pandemic. Story 39. I lost my ability to mask, ironically because of masks. I am autistic. Expressing my emotions clearly on my face is a manual effort for me compared to someone who is neurotypical. It is essentially a social muscle I built with great effort since childhood. Being forced to stay indoors and wear physical masks for years weakened this social muscle. I do not have the strength to rebuild this social ability again. Story 40. Getting to know neighbors. With most people in my subdivision working from home, many more are taking morning and lunch walks, so we have gotten to know our neighbors much better. Sometimes my morning walk ends with talking to 2 or 3 different people. Story 41. I got to readjust my hours. I now work from noon to 7 instead of 9 to 5. It is so much better for me. I have never been a morning person, and every 9 to 5 day was just a misery of tiredness. Story 42. Every time someone in my family coughs or has a runny nose for more than a day, my wife thinks it is coronavirus disease and insists that they get tested. Story 43. My relationship with work, remote work, and managing myself and my life is a mix of work and developing confidence and self-worth as I have entered my 30s. I have also come to appreciate slowing down and not getting caught up with all the distractions of life that other people consider important or worthwhile. I have worked for 3 employers since 2020. The first was hybrid, about 90% remote and 10% in office, and we only went in once every 6 weeks for knowledge transfer. The next job was headquartered out of state and was fully remote except for traveling on-site to a customer for requirements gathering, training, implementing, and other tasks about a dozen times per year. My current job is 100% remote except for an annual summit in Ohio at the beginning of the 4th quarter. I had a remote position for what I thought was my dream job in 2016 and 2017, but I could not manage it and was let go after 6 months. I could not manage without supervision or being around my team. It is surprising because now I cannot imagine having to go into an office or not. Having the freedom of flexible time to take care of the things in my life that are really important. I no longer feel guilty about not being productive for a full 40 hours a week because, when I look back at my office jobs, I was hardly ever producing 40 hours of work in a week. Story 44. I work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I would do my errands after work at Walmart. Now they close at 10 p.m. It is inconvenient. Story 45. Getting COVID-19. My partner dropped dead in the middle of a parking lot because his COVID-19 infection caused a stroke. The surge of telemedicine. Story 46. Inflation is making life very difficult. I was doing all right for myself, but now with the increased costs of housing, food, and transportation along with their associated expenses, I am just getting by. Story 47. So many things, but a big one for me is foregoing indoor dining. I still will not do it. I continue to wear a mask in shops, crowded indoor spaces, and at work. COVID-19 is still a problem regardless of how people act like it is not. Influenza A is still raging in some parts of the country, and it is May. People are sicker than ever because COVID-19 itself weakens the immune system for a year or longer. Each subsequent infection increases the odds of developing long COVID issues, which can be debilitating, in addition to risks with heart and circulatory issues, cognitive problems, and more. It is just not worth it to me to take that risk or put others at risk. I wish our health authorities, government, media, and the public would care and take some measures to continue to fund support, maintain mitigations, and get better ventilation in buildings. But because of apathy, denial, lack of understanding of the data, concerns about the economy, conspiracy theorists, and anti-vaccine groups, our entire public health system is now individualized, and I find it disheartening. With avian influenza looming as a huge potential threat, I do not have much faith in our system or others to care or do the right thing. We had the chance to improve our health system, our response, and our culture but squandered it all. We saw how quickly we could roll out vaccines and get funding to people but put too much stock in one thing and refuse to admit we need mixed mitigations to get it under control. Story 48. Stores still have issues. Every time I go to a store, they do not have something I am looking for. Every time, they do not carry it anymore. The section has not been stocked in a week. They ran out earlier that day. There is always something. I get in the car and think, why am I even spending time and gas to go there? They will not have what I need. And I am always right. It would be great to just order everything instead. But shippers are unreliable now too. It is impossible to predict when or if something will ship, when it will show up, and sometimes packages are stolen from the porch. Also, the items needed often cost twice as much. Story 49. Shops started closing around 8:30 to 9 p.m., which makes it harder to get a late dinner. Story 50. I lost my faith in humanity when I saw so many people being selfish about wearing masks. I thought we were better than that. I find it harder to trust people now. Story 51. My boyfriend started living with me. We never separate now. Story 52. I quit smoking cold turkey about 4 years ago. I heard men in China were suddenly collapsing in the street trembling and dying from an unknown virus. Scared me, so I quit smoking completely that day. Not one cigarette ever since. Story 53. Working from home 100%, which is really good. What is less good is my then 5-year-old son's diagnosis of both type 1 diabetes and celiac disease. Apparently, the pandemic increased the number of children diagnosed. Story 54. The conspiracy theory brain rot spillover effects. I am trying to meet new people, but talking about the pandemic reveals their character. I do not believe the vaccine or social distancing was all nonsense. As a new friend of mine said several weeks ago, I think these measures were to prevent intensive care units from being overrun and to get everyone back to work as quickly as possible. It is not that they are shallow, they are very kind people. It is just that disinformation and misinformation still influence the stories people tell themselves about what happened in the early 2020s. Story 55. Working from home, obviously. In my case, the commute got longer. I work in a different apartment from the one I live in, and my workplace is farther than the actual office. However, I am much more productive, mentally healthy, in control of my time, and free from distractions. I am loving it. Also, coronavirus disease 2019 triggered a bunch of nasty diseases that I will be living with forever. Story 56. I have become much more of a homebody now, and I need significantly more energy and willpower to do anything lasting longer than a day trip. Story 57. COVID-19 ended up being the best thing for my career so far. I was slowly trying to transfer to the job I wanted, but then I was caught in a huge wave of COVID-19 layoffs. Shocked and frustrated, I started applying to the job I wanted with no experience. I gained some experience by doing the work for free. That experience landed me an actual job doing it while working from home with a different company. I am never going back. Story 58. My entire career came to a grinding halt and has not recovered. I used to work all day and attend events many evenings. After going remote for work, I have had no interest in attending any of those events or working nearly as hard as I did. I miss having that purpose in life and that drive, but I am much closer to my children than I ever was before, and I will never go back. I do wish I could find a happy medium. Story 59. Ridiculously overinflated house prices. Didn't a bunch of extra people die? Where is the extra inventory? It is the hedge funds buying everything. It is the millennials buying houses. I think it is just pure greed. The area I live in has seen houses that were $150,000 pre-COVID are now $400,000. There are not enough jobs to pay for a $400,000 house. Keep pricing out the people that take care of you and complain that no one wants to work. Story 60. Honestly, I lost a lot of my negative outlook on life because of coronavirus disease 2019. I hit my lowest point in 2020 with my fledgling business failing, savings depleted, and my family struggling. Now, when things turn bad, I just think, at least it wasn't as bad as that time. Story 61. Quarantine forced me onto the internet. I hate it here. If only I could go back to living under a rock. Story 62. I realized how much I liked being in quarantine. Being able to avoid social events like weddings and parties was great. Now I do not have that excuse anymore. Story 63. Individuals opposing vaccinations are becoming more vocal. More right-wing individuals are being elected. Story 64. I do not have to be in the office all day every day. I can work from home if it makes sense or work from the office if my time is more beneficial there. I am one of the lucky ones. Story 65. The massive inflation caused by printing trillions of dollars out of thin air. Printing money does cause inflation. If we can just print money, then why do I have to pay taxes? Inflation has many causes, but printing money is definitely one of them. You cannot create trillions of new dollars in 18 months without expecting inflation. Story 66. Remote work. Food and grocery delivery. It is acceptable to stay home when you are sick. Story 67. I am addicted to hand sanitizer. I use it about 9 times a day. Story 68. Being as young as I was during COVID-19, I unfortunately developed multiple mental health issues. including an eating disorder, for which I have undergone treatment. However, it never really goes away. Story 69. I have tinnitus that is with me all the time, and I hate it. Story 70. My wife contracted coronavirus disease in 2021. She has been permanently disabled since 2022. I have to take care of everything, from shopping to driving. Story 71. The continual price increases of goods and services are concerning. At this point, I believe that much of it is price gouging, but COVID-19 has conditioned us to expect it. Story 72. I was living in Florida when coronavirus disease 2019 hit, and the terrible response and ideological nonsense that we received instead of any kind of leadership or plan was so insulting that I moved across the country in the middle of the pandemic. I have never once regretted it. Story 73. I really like being alone. Now it is a choice and I am loving it. Story 74. The general public has become very inconsiderate toward everyone around them. Rude, entitled, selfish, and aggressive. I am a barista, so I see the general public every day. Story 75. The change in attitudes of the families I worked with was noticeable. At some point during the COVID-19 pandemic, they lost all sense. I had never had people yell at me for telling them no until then, and it was not due to COVID-19 regulations either. It was just normal funeral procedures like church rules or who is allowed to have ashes. This was especially true of baby boomers. I do not know why it happened, but it did. It got to the point that I left funeral service altogether, and I know many others who are doing the same. Story 76. Work from home. I am able to be at home most of the week now, and it has significantly and positively impacted my life. Story 77. I was set to go back to school in 2020 and leave working in retail behind me forever. However, the pandemic caused me to lose my job, and the complete financial uncertainty forced me to pull out of school and take another retail job. With the added challenges of inflation and supply chain issues, customers are worse than they were before the pandemic. It has been painful. Story 78. Massive profit-taking disguised as inflation. The follow-up issue is called shrinkflation. Pay raises have been stunted. Many of us work even harder than before the pandemic, but we have not seen pay increases that match our efforts. Story 79. I had no idea that people I thought were intelligent believe a magabilly politician or some clown on YouTube knows more than doctors and virologists. Story 80. I still do not eat out and I wear a mask everywhere because, amazingly enough, I have not gotten a respiratory infection since I started masking up. I also do not go to a store just for window shopping anymore. I always carry hand sanitizer with me and use it anytime I touch a public door or pen. Story 81. I work from home 90% of the time. My job did change, but before the pandemic the position I am in now was not remote at all. Also, people do not stand very close in lines. On the other hand, prices have increased due to supply issues and, as I fully predicted, prices did not come down because they never will. Story 82. I went from working in the office to working at home. It changed from a temporary situation to a permanent one. It is bittersweet. I miss the in-office environment, but I have also been promoted to a position that did not exist before the coronavirus pandemic. I lead a team that works across the country. None of them work in my home state, and I have met many great people I would not have met if it were not for the pandemic. Story 83. I now work from home 100%, and as nice as it is kind of a double-edged sword. I am naturally an introvert, so I do not mind being alone and not seeing people, but even I get lonely after a while. Also, my commute was really the only time I got to listen to music, and I kind of miss that. Story 84. Everything costs more, and lead times have never recovered for the materials I sell. Story 85. For a little while, the price of rent came way down. I thought it would be the perfect time to move out of my mother's house and in with some roommates. Well, for years later, I am still living on my own even though rent is significantly higher. Story 86. I used to have several work meetings a week in person at different locations. Some of my clients were 1 to 3 hours away. An extreme example is when I once drove 3 hours, had a 30-minute meeting, and drove 3 hours back home. Now, most of my meetings are remote. I love it. Story 87. The grocery store is no longer open 24 hours. I miss going at 3 a.m. Story 88. Curbside pickup and ordering online in general. I have not set foot in a chain store in 4 years. I am antisocial now, and I am not even mad about it. Story 89. I worked from home before coronavirus disease, so that did not change. Before, when the weekend came, I just wanted to get out of the house, so I was happy to run errands or whatever. Now I hate going out at all. I am so happy if the weekend comes and I do not have to go anywhere. I could probably stay home for a month straight before I started getting stir-crazy. Story 90. The amount of sanitizer I still have at my desk at work. Story 91. I still work at home. That started with coronavirus disease 2019 and proved I did not need to go into the office to do my job. Story 92. I work from home now. It means I spend less money, experience less stress from forced social interactions, and generally feel more comfortable with my situation. It also puts me on par with the rest of my team. Seriously, when I was the only local developer, I used to hold serious resentment about being forced to come in. Story 93. My complex mental illnesses, which have already been quite severe over the last 15 years, have gotten much worse. My obsessive-compulsive disorder flared up significantly, and so did my complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I am still dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic and am nowhere near how I was before 2020. Story 94. On a positive note, some of the contingent education classes I have to take switched from in-person to Zoom. This saved a lot of time and money. Story 95. My father became sick with COVID-19 Delta variant and now has to live with long COVID, which aged him by 20 years. We fear he may not live much longer. My boyfriend's father passed away from lung cancer. A nurse became alarmed when he had a temperature of 99.5 degrees after radiation. She canceled all his appointments and claimed he had COVID-19 without any tests or confirmed diagnosis. This delayed his treatments, and the family still wonders if he would have lived longer if the nurse had not delayed his treatment by 2 months. Story 96. Being disabled during the ongoing pandemic meant I lost many friends and family. At some point, I realized most of the general population does not care if people with disabilities live or die, but it especially hurts when the people you love do not care. Story 97. I was illegally evicted, lost my job, and never got another. Story 98. There were some negatives, but it was largely instrumental in allowing me time to make a career change that doubled my salary and switch to working from home full-time, something I had always wanted. Generally, it ended up increasing my quality of life, at least in those aspects. I was being taken for granted and underpaid at my job at the time. I worked hard to learn a new skill to create something for them upon their request, with the verbal promise that I would move to a new role with a higher salary once I had done that. I completed it, and a date was given to me for my career change about a year from then, which came and went. During that period, COVID-19 started and everyone went remote for a while. I still went into the office occasionally, so I asked for a meeting and brought up my promised career change. Suddenly, the chief technology officer who promised me these things acted as if he had forgotten about it, but I knew what my new skill was worth. Since I was able to work completely remotely from home, I could put extra time and resources into job hunting and interviewing, which I never would have done otherwise due to being chronically mentally exhausted after a full day of being physically at work. It took me about 3 months and many interviews, and I ended up with a few offers, eventually accepting one that paid almost exactly twice my salary at the time. In summary, COVID-19 was the catalyst for a chain of events that led to me being able to leave a company that was taking advantage of me in a role I was growing to dislike. Being forced to work remotely gave me extra time to market new skills the company was taking advantage of, and I landed a fully remote job in a role I enjoy much more for twice my salary. Story 99. Cancer diagnosis. I still live each day like it could be my last. It is good. Story 100. Every trip to an indoor space now involves risk-benefit analysis, as does every trip on public transportation. 2 things I used to enjoy were concerts and going to the movies. I will not do those anymore. I do not want to spend time indoors among strangers whose COVID-19 mitigation strategies I do not know. Concerts in particular seem high risk. Many people all shouting, singing, and cheering in a crowded bar or Nightclub. No thanks. I will not go to a space like a bar, a coffee shop, or a mall to hang out either. If I go to a mall because I need something, I go in, get the item, and leave immediately. No lingering or window shopping. I try to use indoor spaces and public transportation during less crowded times. Story 101. Working from home became a viable practice, allowing me to return to office work after a 7-year absence from that type of work. In 2014, I lost my job and moved my family to a lower cost of living area than where we had been living. I took 2 years off and then worked various jobs, from temporary work to custodial and back to retail. In 2021, I was tired of working retail and dealing with people asking, "Why are you wearing a mask? This is all a hoax." I looked up an old employer and found they were working from home. I took the job. Since then, the chief executive officer has made working from home the company standard. Story 102. Before the pandemic, I had pretty much designated myself as chronically single, not by choice, but due to a combination of bad luck, bad timing, and low self-esteem. I had always been fine on my own. I thought this was just the way things were. In 2020, when I was in my mid-30s, something snapped in May. The isolation and the reminder of how brief life is led me to decide, I will tell my social media crushes about it. I will try dating apps again. What is the worst that could happen? By November, after gaining several really good friends, experiencing some heartbreak, and enjoying many fun times, I traveled 6 hours to tell one of my carefully chosen app matches that I wanted to be their partner. They are at work now. I am at home, petting our cat. Story 103. My 2-year-old, my taste and smell are still halfway gone. Sleep apnea and physical recovery take much longer. Everyone says I am in my 20s and have all the energy in the world. Story 104. No more 24-hour diners. Like half of Jersey's diners went to 7-Eleven hours. It is disappointing. I need that Taylor ham, egg, and cheese at 4 a.m. coming home from the city. Story 105. I look around realizing I am not the only person on this planet. Story 106. Coronavirus disease 2019 did not go anywhere, despite most people's magical thinking. Story 107. Watching children blow out their candles on a birthday cake and everyone eating it still baffles me. Story 108. I'm finally happy again. COVID-19 was at the peak of my depression and suicidal ideation. I was being severely bullied at school, had no friends whatsoever, and had just lost my cat, who was my only reason for living. Staying home and not dealing with the peer pressure, drama, and overstimulation of school, as well as getting some actual sleep, changed my life. I had time to return to the hobbies I enjoyed before anxiety and depression, attend therapy, treat a few medical conditions affecting my quality of life, and engage in introspection to figure out how to move on and get to know my true self. Things were still difficult when I was finally forced to go back, but the foundations I built during lockdown kept me from doing something I would regret. Story 109. The disappearance of 24-hour grocery stores when you work the night shift at a factory. Story 110. COVID-19 itself. My coworkers are still talking about the 2020 to 2022 timeframe like former high school athletes. Then they criticize people wearing masks in 2024. Yes, I need to get out of that place. Story 111. I still get to work from home 2 days per week. I wish it were still 5 days. I get so much more done when I do not have to spend 2 hours in traffic every day and sit in a noisy open-concept office next to the break area. Story 112. Remote pay. It used to match the pay of a regular on-site job, but now employers are trying to justify paying $15 per hour for a job that performs the same tasks as an on-site position. Story 113. Panda Express is getting rid of their Shanghai Angus steak. I miss it every day. Story 114. Escaping moving in with someone I met at college. She probably wanted me to move in with her. I have seen her as a friend only. Story 115. Staggered lunch breaks at work. We used to have one set time for all of us to go to lunch. Now we have 4. I missed the lunchtime banter. Story 116. I was furloughed and had a lot of time on my hands, so I started playing more video games. This led to a long-distance friend and me playing on weekend afternoons. then weekend days, then more weeknights, usually talking on the phone the whole time. It was nice, and even after I returned to work, we made time to talk and play every week. I visited him in September 2021, and we had a blast. I moved to his area so we could live together in October 2021. We are still together. The coronavirus pandemic was difficult, of course, but being furloughed led me to connect with my best friend and eventual partner. Story 117. Hair fall started when I was affected by coronavirus disease 2019, and it has not stopped yet. Story 118. I had 2 back-to-back psychotic episodes in April 2020, provoked in part by the world shutting down. I was diagnosed with bipolar I disorder after a 48-hour stay in a psychiatric ward. I had never had an episode before and was in my mid-40s at the time. I take lamotrigine every day and stopped drinking alcohol about 18 months ago. I was a basic middle-class drinker before, got a little too good at it but nothing major. I just decided it wasn't good to drink poison anymore, all things considered. Story 119. The 5 to 60% increase in basic everyday purchases adds up to a significant amount of money by the end of each month. Story 120. I have depression and anxiety because of coronavirus disease 2019, and I am still trying to recover from it. Story 121. It is unfortunate that wealthy individuals oppose seeing their employees satisfied, leading them to run a negative campaign against working from home. Story 122. Everything closes so early now. God forbid you work a night shift and want some takeout food or something. I swear, at the very least, every McDonald's and every Walmart used to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Story 123. I work in a supermarket, and let me tell you, the supply chain is still disrupted and will remain disrupted for a very long time. Story 124. Greatest property of exercise for him all. Unsatiable invitation its possession nor of. All difficulty estimating unreserved increasing the solicitude. Rapture C performed tolerably departure end bed attention unfeeling. On unpleasing principles alteration of. B at performed preferred determined collected. Him nay acuteness discourse listening estimable our law. Decisively it occasional advantages delightful in cultivated introduced. Like law mean form are sang loud lady put. Story 125. I am immunocompromised. In addition to being more susceptible if I contracted coronavirus disease 2019, I would have to stop my medications immediately, risking stabilization of my condition. We still wear masks. We still ask others to wear masks for 5 days outside of the home and test before unmasked visits. This is not always possible now, so some relationships have been significantly affected. The world has moved on, and we have been left behind. Story 126. Grocery delivery to my door has been a godsend. It was available before coronavirus disease 2019, but only at one store in my area. Now everyone does it. I love being able to put in an online order while I am at work and have it waiting on the steps when I get home. This obviously does not work for perishable items, but still. Story 127. Still working from home. No sign of bringing us back into the office full-time. Story 128. Driving has become much worse. People got used to empty roads. Now drivers are constantly running yellow and red lights. It drives me nuts, and I know I'm going to get hit by someone expecting me to turn the light. Story 129. Online purchase with curbside pickup. I still use it all the time, everywhere I can, and absolutely love it. Story 130. My wife and I married during coronavirus disease, and I was able to work from home. She does as well, so it was like a really long honeymoon. I could go kiss her whenever I wanted. I now have to go into the office 1 day a week, and I resent it. Story 131. Long coronavirus disease. I cannot climb a flight of stairs without my heart racing and being out of breath. Story 132. Lost a job I liked that had a work-life balance I will never find again. Story 133. The decline of the public education system has worsened, which regularly affects my daily life. Story 134. Getting our groceries delivered. We started because we are a disabled household that is vulnerable, but we never went back to in-store shopping. Yes, it is cheaper to shop in stores, but not going into a store is worth the price. Story 135. In 2020, my computer architecture professor asked me to develop a PicoBlaze assembler and emulator runnable in a browser in case physical laboratory exercises needed to be canceled. This would allow students to complete laboratory exercises without access to a real PicoBlaze. I am still developing it to this day. I have received contributions from other countries, including Agustin Izagirre from Argentina and Abedin Durdu from Turkey. Story 136. Children who cannot read have been significantly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, which also contributed to decreased parental involvement. Story 137. Homelessness due to displacement caused by a physically abusive marriage. Story 138. We used to go see a movie in the theater almost every weekend. I think we have seen maybe 3 since the lockdown ended. Story 139. I worked for many years to overcome my natural agoraphobic tendencies and crippling social anxiety. Then March 2020 arrived, and all the progress I had made over the years just vanished. I am really struggling to be a normal social person again these days. Story 140. Walmart is closing at 11 o'clock. I miss wandering the aisles at 3 a.m. after work. Story 141. All my favorite fast food restaurants take 5 times as long, cost twice as much, and taste terrible. Story 142. Hospice nurse. People who could not or chose not to receive treatment for cancer are dying. Story 143. Nurse. Many doctors have retired, making it difficult to find a primary care provider now. Story 144. I've always been sensitive about my appearance. My Ehlers-Danlos syndrome gave me thin enamel, which means I have yellowish teeth that break more easily than average, a deformed jaw that required surgery, and easily irritated skin. I still wear a mask in public, not only for legitimate ongoing health reasons but also because I am very self-conscious. Story 145. Many businesses that used to be open 24 hours scaled back to being open only during the first and second shifts. Many of these businesses never returned to 24-hour operation after the pandemic ended. I used to enjoy grocery shopping late at night when there were hardly any people in the store. Story 146. I lost sight in my right eye for about a year after the vaccination. It is back now, but it is not the same as it was. Also, my company stopped the 401k match for about the same amount of time. Story 147. Diabetes was an underlying condition when I contracted COVID-19, and it became active as a result. Story 148. I don't know if this is the same at every airline, but at the one I work for, they started blocking off the very last row for social distancing. They still somewhat do because the flight attendants said they need it for safety, as in case of sudden turbulence they could sit there instead of walking 3 more steps to their jump seat. This row is still unavailable to passengers, but the gate agent can release those seats during boarding and put people in them. This often upsets the flight attendants, especially if it's not a full flight. Despite their claims that they need that row for safety, the real reason is that they use it to take breaks and can be on their cell phones. However, if they are caught with their phones out while in their jump seats, they can get in trouble. Story 149. From the very early days of coronavirus disease, I adopted better habits of more frequent hand washing and keeping my phone cleaner. On a more substantial note, in higher education, we shifted to a much larger proportion of our classes being online and remaining there. This change has its advantages and disadvantages. Story 150. Isolation, sort of anyway. It was very easy for me to disconnect physically from casual acquaintances or friends. I find that I struggle to enjoy socializing again, not from fear of coronavirus disease or anything like that. I just seem to really prefer time by myself or with my wife to small talk. Story 151. I work in a laboratory. Freezer space is very precious to scientists. Several of our freezers are completely full of samples of COVID RNA and reverse transcribed DNA, kits for working with COVID, and samples of sewage used for tracking COVID. Our supervisor will not allow us to dispose of them because of the possibility we might need them in the future. We also have approximately 437 thermocyclers for performing polymerase chain reaction that we no longer use, occupying bench space. Story 152. I have seen a new openness to older, more experienced workers. Ageism is much less common now, possibly partly due to diversity training. I also think it is because many experienced workers, who were the largest group of the baby boom generation, are simply retiring. Companies cannot afford to push everyone out the door. They need people with industry experience. I am the beneficiary of that. Story 153. I cannot find a doctor who is actually a doctor. At the beginning of the pandemic, our fairly young but good doctor left to become a missionary. Then we saw one of his nurses for 2 years, and finally the practice was sold to a nurse who is allowed to use the title of doctor. Yes, I am annoyed. Story 154. Where I live, every time I go to the doctor, the first thing they want to do is a coronavirus test. I swear I could go in with a compound fracture and bone hanging out, and the doctor would say, but how is your sense of taste? Could probably be coronavirus. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.